Now, of course, we'll see issues on the policing side on both of these fronts, whether it's medical or recreational. But looking at what's happened in Illinois with the recreational, we are seeing a huge problem on our side, but on the St. Louis side with the policing, because folks are coming back over, and so that's a whole issue in itself. But to answer your question, I don't necessarily see that they would affect each other. We're still going to have these issues with medical marijuana regardless. There's going to be a lot of lawsuits and trying to get this cleaned up. I personally would like to see us go back to the licensing process. The constitutional amendment had a minimum of licenses that we could dole out, but no maximum. What the Parson administration decided to do was just do the minimum of licenses that were available. I'm a believer in free market. I don't think that the government should be limiting that, and so I would like to see those licenses opened. We see a Walgreens on every corner, and that doesn't affect their businesses. I don't know why we would view this one differently, but I don't think that they would counteract with each other.
Reading a question from Claire Parker at 10 a.m. Her language. I have seen news about Planned Parenthood clinics being shut down or losing their license for being some of the only clinics in Missouri. Would Missouri consider building more, closer to popular cities for younger teens who deal with teen pregnancy?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Planned Parenthood, we have several in the state. There's only one abortion provider in the state of Missouri, and that's in St. Louis. So every other Planned Parenthood is just for medication and cancer screenings. And so the one here in Springfield, that's where I go to get my pap smears every year. Over the course of probably the past 10 years, the Missouri legislature has been changing the laws on how these Planned Parenthoods is going to operate and who cannot provide abortion services. And that's not just surgical, but that's also the abortion where you take a pill and you have a DNC. That is considered an abortion per our statutes. So the way the laws were set prior to 2 years ago, St. Louis was the only facility that could provide abortions, and a lot of that had to do with weird regulations on like the size of your hallway. Like you can't do a pill abortion unless your hallway is 8 feet long, and the reason behind that was you've got to get a gurney or the wheeled bed through it and that type of thing, even if you're providing a pill abortion, which didn't make a lot of logical sense. So all that said, the Columbia Planned Parenthood used to provide abortions. Now we are just down to the St. Louis. Last year, House Bill 126 was passed, which gave us the most stringent abortion laws in the country, providing that you could not get an abortion or a pill abortion past 8 weeks, and there's no exceptions for rape or incest. So we are right up there with Mississippi in the most stringent abortion laws in the country. That bill is currently being challenged in court as unconstitutional. It has been said by the Republicans who wrote the bill or who sponsored the legislation that the intent of that bill was to get it to the Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade. So it'll be a while before we see the implementation of 126. If it does become law, the morning after pill will also be illegal in Missouri.
This is coming from one of our students in here called Yana Jamerson, coming from a district that is one of the most conservative parts of the state, conservative parts of the country. What is the dynamic like as a Democrat in handling a conservative region?
Yeah, the dynamic is interesting. I joke I'm often the only Democrat sitting on a panel surrounded by Republican lawmakers. I am the only Democrat south of Columbia in either the House or Senate, so I kind of have a responsibility for the whole southern half of the state in terms of the Democrats. So the dynamic is interesting, but in some ways I think it holds me to be a better legislator, because my district is, while I won with 65% of the vote, 2010 it was held by a Republican. It does flip back and forth, so my district is pretty 50-50 on a lot of issues. And so what that forces me to do as an elected representative is actually listen to my people. I do surveys, I sit down with them. I don't always vote with my party, but as the floor leader, I allow the caucus to vote however they think they need to be voting. There's no punishments for voting against me or different from me. But I do think that it is helpful to be representing a district that is more bipartisan. We look at St. Louis, where no Republicans run at all, and the only elections are among primary members. Those folks don't know what it's like to run against Republicans. They don't know the dynamic. But in some ways, it adds to hostility, because we do have elections. I there are always negative mail pieces about me. There's all sorts of slander. They call me a socialist, and my picture's up with flags behind me, and all sorts of terrible things happen on the campaign side that my colleagues, either running in safe Republican seats or safe Democrat seats, don't necessarily have to deal with. So it does make it a little bit harder. And I will also say, as minority floor leader, I have not had a single bill referred to committee. It's the first time since 2003 that a floor leader has not had a bill referred, and that's simply because they don't want me to win. And so it is very partisan. It continues to get worse in that way. So it's heavy, but and I do think in some regards it makes me a better legislator.
This is a question from Allison Crenshaw. She was reading about you. She said she tried to look up the bill you created called the Hand-Up Program. Wants to know what it is.
Yeah. So the Hand-Up Program is a bill that I have filed every year that I've been in the legislature to help with daycare subsidies. And so we're going to get in the weeds for a second, but as a social worker and quite frankly knocking doors in my district, this was something that I heard a lot about. In Missouri, when you are getting state aid for anything, it's all based on your income, as it should be. But what we see is, for instance, when we're talking about daycare specifically, which is what my bill deals with, you say you're a single parent of 3 and you make $8 an hour, and you're right at the income threshold of getting daycare subsidies. You might get $300 a month for your kids to go to daycare so that you can go to work. If you take any sort of pay raise or work more hours that put you over that threshold, you lose everything. So as a single parent, I could make $50 more a month, but lose $400 in daycare. Why would I do that? So the current policies that we have around our social service programs across the whole country, frankly, in my opinion, keep people in poverty. We are punishing them when they succeed and making them really put themselves in the question of, do I further my career and hope one day I'm making $20, $30 an hour, but this time in between I'm going to have zero support. And so most of the time when I talk to people in my district, they say, I'm not working anymore because once I was working and I lost all my child care and I couldn't afford to go to work anymore. And we see that time and time again, and that is, in my opinion, what is keeping people on welfare. So what my bill does is a pilot program for just a handful of counties in Missouri, because we can't really do anything sweeping without trying it out first and proving that it works. That creates a sliding scale for daycare specifically. And I chose daycare because that's the biggest cliff that we see that folks fall off of, where a small amount of money takes all of this other money away from you. So what it does is it creates a sliding scale. So you get a pay raise and you get a little less money from the state. You get a pay raise, you get a little less money from the state. And then it essentially weans you off of a program. So it allows our parents to take those pay raises to further their career, still get some support from the state to eventually get off of the daycare program.
We've got a lot more. Any questions for Representative Quade before I continue reading off some of these others?
We really just need to go get coffee.
Yeah, we do. So I've been wondering about the boundary lines and all that for a long time, and I haven't read a lot about into it. Why can we not just, I guess it's part of the population, but why can't we just draw squares?
Yeah, so my husband's in IT, so I'm always like, why don't we just use a computer to do this, right? There are some things that, per our Constitution, that we need to factor in when we are making our lines. So some of that is race. So for instance, you need to make sure that race is equitable so that we're not shoving all the black people in one district and they only get one district to have a say in, and which is something that happens. You also need to factor in geographic areas. So if there was like a big old river coming through my district, that is factored in when we're looking at it. There's all sorts of demographics that we have to factor in, and Clean Missouri actually lists them all out, and I don't know them all by heart. But so that's part of it, and looking at the cultural demographics of things is also important too. I do believe, and I have no real reason to say this to you, but I do believe that we will eventually get to the point where our computer systems are just plugging it out for us, because we do know where the registered voters are. We know, based on census data, we can tell you everything. And so the fact that we're using politicians who know nothing about maps, so they were before, is kind of interesting to me. At least now in Missouri, we'll use a map maker. A demographer is a map maker. They go to school for that. And so they will have a much better understanding of following those rules in the Constitution of what we have to listen to.
How comfortable are you talking about federal politics? You're more state level.
I'm state level, but I can try.
We can, okay, well, we had a couple of students write federal questions.
Okay.
One federal question involves the president. Being a Democrat, how did you feel about the whole ordeal involving the impeachment trial of President Trump?
That's a heavy question. I would say ultimately for me, in looking at what's been going on with the presidency, for me it's more about the institution than it's about politics, and I know that you probably don't believe that coming out of my mouth. But one of the things that I really try to do as a legislator is remember the institution that I am representing, and that means that my job is to be a voice for my 37,000 people, regardless of what I want. That's my job as a representative, is to do what they tell me to do. Now, I should be honest with them about my opinions, and I do have some things that, like, I just will stop running if they ask me to do things that I don't agree with. But that's my job. And so when I look at the presidency and the job of the Senate and the House, they have jobs to do. And I fully respect the House's position to move in that direction because they feel that there were rules broken. And, you know, the Senate choosing to do what they did, you know, my own personal beliefs aside, I want to uphold the institution and what our Constitution has laid out for us. To get in the weeds of it all, I personally wish that we could have heard from witnesses. I think that it got super partisan when we looked at Mitch McConnell saying before the hearings even began that he was meeting with the lawyers from the White House. Looking at, the closest thing that I can look at this to is what happened with Governor Greitens. Does anybody remember when Greitens was here? So the House had our own investigation into him, and it was led by Republicans. There's only 48 of us. We didn't have any say in this. The Republicans looked at an investigation into our governor because they felt like he was breaking laws. And throughout the whole thing, he ended up resigning. But we had witnesses, we had hearings, we had, a lot of it was closed out to the public due to the nature of the allegations. We were talking about people and individual women being assaulted and all of that, so there was a lot of private stuff that happened. But we had hearings, and we had witnesses from both sides, and we had lawyers in the room, and we had a full-on investigation. From that investigation, there were recommendations made, and ultimately the governor resigned. I feel like the Republicans in Jefferson City handled that with the utmost dignity, and while I disagree with them on a whole lot of things, they followed the law, and we heard from everybody. There was not an ousting from him. We didn't force him out. He willingly resigned. I think that when we're talking to about something with this magnitude, everything should be on the table. And so, I don't know, I could go more into it, but.
The last question, this is from Joshua Pruitt, 11:30 a.m. Once again, staying federal. Do you think there is well, I'll just read his question. Who do you think is the best presidential candidate for the Democratic Party?
Well, first of all, as minority leader, I cannot endorse anyone. I truly can't. I go to everyone. I'm in communication with all of the presidential campaigns in Missouri, and so I will go to everything that I'm asked to go to, and I don't endorse. That said, I do have a favorite, but I will be honest with you that my favorite is different than my favorite as minority leader in Missouri. Because when I think about the political success of my party and growing my party, I do view that different than what I personally believe in my values. And so I don't know who I'm voting for. I was going to go vote today because I'm going to be out of town on election day. I'll be in Jeff City. But I still don't know who I'm voting for. So, don't know.
Guys, this is so generous of you giving us some time of your. A round of applause for our. I will just ask that you check out Canvas, since I don't have time to talk about Monday. Check out Canvas after class. In the meantime, thank you very much, guys.
And I will say, if you do want to get coffee and discuss more, I'm more than happy to. I really mean it when I say that.